December 17th, 1944. Malmedy, Belgium. A United States Army roadblock halted a Willys Jeep carrying 4 apparent American soldiers at dawn. Their papers appeared legitimate, their uniforms correct, their weapons standard issue. Then one guard asked the driver to name the capital of Illinois. The pause lasted 3 seconds too long. Within minutes, all 4 men stood under arrest. Germans from SS Panzer Brigade 150, disguised as American GIs under Operation Greif. Across the Ardennes that morning, similar incidents triggered alarm through Allied command. By nightfall, headquarters warned that infiltrators were posing as friendly forces. Roadblocks multiplied. Orders slowed. The United States First Army briefly detained its own generals for verification. What began as a small commando deception became a crisis affecting 200,000 troops. The operation's goal seemed simple: seize bridges over the Meuse River. Its consequences reached far beyond any bridge. The map table at Wolf's Lair on October 22, 1944, displayed Hitler's final gamble on the Western Front. The Führer's finger traced a bold arrow across the Ardennes sector. Terrain the Allies considered quiet, suitable for rest and refitting worn divisions. Operation Wacht am Rhein would mass 3 armies, 600 tanks, and 200,000 men for a winter offensive aimed at Antwerp. Success might split the Anglo-American alliance and force negotiations before Soviet armies reached Berlin. But Hitler demanded something beyond conventional assault. He wanted psychological disruption, command confusion, bridges seized before defenders could react. On October 20th, he summoned SS Obersturmbannführer Otto Skorzeny, the commando leader who had rescued Mussolini from Gran Sasso in 1943. The new mission required formation of a disguised brigade capable of operating behind enemy lines in American uniforms, equipped with captured vehicles and manned by fluent English speakers. General Alfred Jodel's directive specified 150 commandos as minimum strength for the infiltration force. Intelligence officers compiled lists of German personnel with language skills, combat experience, and appropriate physical characteristics. The response proved sobering. Out of 2,500 volunteers eventually assembled, only 150 could communicate adequately in English. Most spoke basic phrases learned in school. Perhaps 44 possessed genuine fluency. The operational constraint was embedded at conception. Germany could supply saboteurs, but not native speakers. Skorzeny's planning staff calculated bridge seizure requirements based on optimistic assumptions about language capability, equipment availability, and Allied response times. Reality began diverging from expectations before training commenced. Grafenwöhr training area in Bavaria became home to Panzer Brigade 150 during November 1944. Quartermaster records documented the gap between staff requests and actual deliveries. The brigade required thousands of United States uniforms, hundreds of captured vehicles, and extensive radio equipment for deception operations. Depots in France and Belgium yielded 150 complete American uniform sets, 15 Willys MB Jeeps, 6 M8 Greyhound armored cars, and 5 M4 Sherman tanks. The Shermans proved mechanically unreliable. 3 required immediate repairs. 2 lacked sufficient spare parts for sustained operations. German engineers attempted creative solutions to equipment shortages. Panther tanks received sheet metal modifications intended to resemble M10 tank destroyers when viewed from distance. Black paint covered German gray, white stars replaced Balkenkreuz markings, and false muzzle brakes disguised the 75mm guns. Close inspection revealed the deception, but planners hoped confusion and poor visibility would provide sufficient cover during initial penetration. Training syllabi emphasized American military procedures, radio protocols, and traffic patterns. Instructors taught recognition of United States rank insignia, proper saluting customs, and convoy discipline. Language drills focused on common phrases, checkpoint responses, navigation questions, mechanical problems. The training revealed persistent gaps. Many volunteers understood English but struggled with American accents and idioms. Fewer than 1 in 10 could maintain extended conversations without arousing suspicion. Fuel shortages plagued preparation throughout November. War diary entries noted deliveries at 35% of requested volumes. Ammunition stocks remained adequate for initial operations, but insufficient for sustained combat. Radio equipment shortages forced improvisation. German sets received American markings, but frequency compatibility issues remained unresolved. By December 10th, Skorzeny faced uncomfortable reality. Paper strength promised a brigade. Usable capability consisted of approximately 44 English-capable commandos organized into small jeep teams, designated Einheitsstilau, plus conventional forces in modified German equipment. The mission emphasis shifted from bridge seizure to traffic disruption, communications sabotage, and rumor operations. Success would depend more on American confusion than German capability. The Ardennes front, during early December 1944, appeared to Allied intelligence as the quietest sector on the Western Front. United States First Army G2 summaries described rest and refit conditions. Divisions recovering from Hurtgen Forest, battles occupied extended frontage with thin picket lines. 1 soldier per 10 meters of front represented standard deployment. Supply convoys moved freely through rear areas, delivering 11,000 tons of fuel and ammunition daily via Antwerp and Liège. December 17, 1944. Malmedy, Belgium. A United States Army roadblock halted a Willys Jeep carrying 4 apparent American soldiers at dawn. Their papers appeared legitimate, their uniforms correct, their weapons standard issue. Then one guard asked the driver to name the capital of Illinois. The pause lasted 3 seconds too long. Within minutes, all 4 men stood under arrest. Germans from SS Panzer Brigade 150, disguised as American GIs under Operation Greif. Across the Ardennes that morning, similar incidents triggered alarm through Allied command. By nightfall, headquarters warned that infiltrators were posing as friendly forces. Roadblocks multiplied. Orders slowed. The United States First Army briefly detained its own generals for verification. What began as a small commando deception became a crisis affecting 200,000 troops. The operation's goal seemed simple: seize bridges over the Meuse River. Its consequences reached far beyond any bridge. The map table at Wolf's Lair on October 22, 1944, displayed Hitler's final gamble on the Western Front. The Führer's finger traced a bold arrow across the Ardennes sector. Terrain the Allies considered quiet, suitable for rest and refitting worn divisions. Operation Wacht am Rhein would mass 3 armies, 600 tanks, and 200,000 men for a winter offensive aimed at Antwerp. Success might split the Anglo-American alliance and force negotiations before Soviet armies reached Berlin. But Hitler demanded something beyond conventional assault. He wanted psychological disruption, command confusion, bridges seized before defenders could react. On October 20th, he summoned SS Obersturmbannführer Otto Skorzeny, the commando leader who had rescued Mussolini from Gran Sasso in 1943. The new mission required formation of a disguised brigade capable of operating behind enemy lines in American uniforms, equipped with captured vehicles and manned by fluent English speakers. General Alfred Jodel's directive specified 150 commandos as minimum strength for the infiltration force. Intelligence officers compiled lists of German personnel with language skills, combat experience, and appropriate physical characteristics. The response proved sobering. Out of 2,500 volunteers eventually assembled, only 150 could communicate adequately in English. Most spoke basic phrases learned in school. Perhaps 44 possessed genuine fluency. The operational constraint was embedded at conception. Germany could supply saboteurs, but not native speakers. Skorzeny's planning staff calculated bridge seizure requirements based on optimistic assumptions about language capability, equipment availability, and Allied response times. Reality began diverging from expectations before training commenced. Grafenwöhr training area in Bavaria became home to Panzer Brigade 150 during November 1944. Quartermaster records documented the gap between staff requests and actual deliveries. The brigade required thousands of United States uniforms, hundreds of captured vehicles, and extensive radio equipment for deception operations. Depots in France and Belgium yielded 150 complete American uniform sets, 15 Willys MB Jeeps, 6 M8 Greyhound armored cars, and 5 M4 Sherman tanks. The Shermans proved mechanically unreliable. 3 required immediate repairs. 2 lacked sufficient spare parts for sustained operations. German engineers attempted creative solutions to equipment shortages. Panther tanks received sheet metal modifications intended to resemble M10 tank destroyers when viewed from distance. Black paint covered German gray, white stars replaced Balkenkreuz markings, and false muzzle brakes disguised the 75mm guns. Close inspection revealed the deception, but planners hoped confusion and poor visibility would provide sufficient cover during initial penetration. Training syllabi emphasized American military procedures, radio protocols, and traffic patterns. Instructors taught recognition of United States rank insignia, proper saluting customs, and convoy discipline. Language drills focused on common phrases, checkpoint responses, navigation questions, mechanical problems. The training revealed persistent gaps. Many volunteers understood English but struggled with American accents and idioms. Fewer than 1 in 10 could maintain extended conversations without arousing suspicion. Fuel shortages plagued preparation throughout November. War diary entries noted deliveries at 35% of requested volumes. Ammunition stocks remained adequate for initial operations, but insufficient for sustained combat. Radio equipment shortages forced improvisation. German sets received American markings, but frequency compatibility issues remained unresolved. By December 10th, Skorzeny faced uncomfortable reality. Paper strength promised a brigade. Usable capability consisted of approximately 44 English-capable commandos organized into small jeep teams, designated Einheitsstilau, plus conventional forces in modified German equipment. The mission emphasis shifted from bridge seizure to traffic disruption, communications sabotage, and rumor operations. Success would depend more on American confusion than German capability. The Ardennes front, during early December 1944, appeared to Allied intelligence as the quietest sector on the Western Front. United States First Army G. 2 summaries described rest and refit conditions. Divisions recovering from Hurtgen Forest, battles occupied extended frontage with thin picket lines. 1 soldier per 10 meters of front represented standard deployment. Supply convoys moved freely through rear areas, delivering 11,000 tons of fuel and ammunition daily via Antwerp and Liège. Morning of December 17th brought expanded infiltration as additional teams penetrated forward areas. 1 jeep near Malmedy carried 4 Germans whose papers passed initial inspection. When questioned about Illinois' capital, the driver hesitated before answering Chicago instead of Springfield. Subsequent search discovered demolition charges, bridge maps, and forged movement orders. Interrogation confirmed the prisoners belonged to SS Panzer Brigade 150, operating under Skorzeny's command. The capture triggered immediate alarm through First Army headquarters. If Germans were operating in American uniforms, any soldier might be an infiltrator. Orders went out to all units. Enemy in American uniform may be operating in your area. Verify all personnel and vehicles. The directive transformed routine military police work into exhaustive screening operations. Traffic patterns slowed dramatically as checkpoints proliferated. Convoys requiring rapid movement to threatened sectors faced verification delays measured in hours rather than minutes. Fuel trucks destined for Bastogne arrived late. Ammunition deliveries to Saint-Vith encountered unexpected stops. The cumulative effect created friction throughout the American logistics network at precisely the moment when speed and efficiency mattered most. German teams exploited the confusion with practiced efficiency. Signs pointing towards Stavelot were reversed to indicate routes toward dead-end roads. Telephone exchanges near Verviers received sabotage that delayed communications for 6 hours. One fuel convoy followed misdirection into a captured area and was lost entirely. The single most successful German tactical achievement of Operation Greif. But rumor proved more potent than explosive charges. Reports circulated that Skorzeny's Commandos intended to assassinate General Eisenhower at SHAEF headquarters in Versailles. The story lacked factual basis. No captured documents or interrogations mentioned assassination missions, but possessed sufficient plausibility to generate serious security response. By December 18th, Eisenhower's movements were restricted, headquarters security doubled, and courier procedures modified. The fear generated by approximately 44 infiltrators created effects disproportionate to their actual capabilities. Staff officers at all levels spent time verifying credentials rather than processing tactical information. Transportation routes required additional guards. Ammunition expenditure increased as nervous sentries fired at suspicious movements. The Germans had discovered that deception multiplied force beyond physical presence. December 18th brought systematic Allied countermeasures based on cultural knowledge rather than military procedure. Military police began asking soldiers about baseball teams, movie stars, and state capitals. The questions reflected improvisation rather than doctrine, but proved remarkably effective at identifying infiltrators whose language training emphasized military terminology over civilian culture. At SHAEF headquarters in Versailles, security measures reached unprecedented levels. General Eisenhower found himself confined to the compound for his own protection. British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's profile increased in northern sectors as American command dealt with internal security concerns. The Supreme Commander's restriction generated political friction. Some British officers suggested it demonstrated American vulnerability to psychological warfare. General Omar Bradley encountered personal experience with verification procedures when military police detained him at a checkpoint near Luxembourg. Despite his rank and staff car markings, guards demanded proof of identity beyond uniform and paperwork. Bradley answered questions about American football and geography before receiving clearance to proceed. The incident, later confirmed in multiple accounts, demonstrated how thoroughly security concerns had penetrated military operations. Similar detentions occurred throughout the American rear area. General Bruce Clark of 7th Armored Division faced armed guards who refused to accept his credentials until staff officers provided verification. British Lieutenant Colonel David Niven, serving as a liaison officer, underwent interrogation about English geography and royal family details. By December 20th, over 2,000 soldiers had been detained for extended identity checks, with most released after questioning confirmed their legitimacy. The security measures created measurable operational impact. Fuel deliveries to Bastogne slowed by 30% due to checkpoint delays. Reinforcement orders to Saint-Vith arrived hours behind schedule. Artillery ammunition expenditure outpaced delivery rates as transport faced verification procedures. The gap between German infiltrator numbers and American response demonstrated successful psychological warfare. 44 commandos generated fear affecting 200,000 troops. Intelligence analysis struggled to assess infiltrator strength and capabilities. Initial estimates suggested hundreds of Germans might be operating in American uniforms. Subsequent interrogations of captured personnel revealed smaller numbers but sophisticated training. The psychological uncertainty proved more disruptive than accurate knowledge would have been. Commanders planned for worst-case scenarios, rather than actual threats. German monitoring of American radio traffic detected signs of successful deception. Allied communications revealed widespread security concerns, movement delays, and command confusion. Skorzeny's after-action reports noted that enemy overestimation of our strength exceeded expectations, though he acknowledged that bridge objectives remained beyond reach. By December 19th, the verification system had settled into patterns that balanced security against operational necessity. Standard questions about American culture became routine at checkpoints. Soldiers carried additional identification cards listing personal details beyond military records. The improvised measures represented adaptation rather than doctrine, but proved adequate for containing infiltration threats while maintaining essential military functions. December 19th brought unexpected complications for Skorzeny's operation. Friendly fire from German forces, unable to distinguish disguised Panthers from genuine American armor. Fog that aided initial infiltration now created identification problems affecting both sides. Several modified German tanks drew fire from Wehrmacht units, convinced they faced enemy vehicles. Recognition panels and radio procedures failed to prevent incidents that reduced Panzer Brigade 150's effective strength. At La Gliese, a Panther disguised as an M10 tank destroyer approached German positions and received immediate artillery fire. The crew abandoned their vehicle after taking casualties, reporting that white stars and American markings had become liability rather than asset. Similar incidents occurred near Malmedy and Trois Ponts. German after-action documents noted misfires in recognition procedures exceeded acceptable levels. Fuel shortages compounded tactical problems. The modified Panthers consumed fuel at rates German logistics could not sustain. Several vehicles ran dry during movement toward Meuse crossings, forcing crews to abandon equipment that could not be recovered. Ammunition supplies remained adequate, but could not reach vehicles immobilized by fuel exhaustion. Radio communications broke down under combined pressure of Allied jamming and German identification confusion. American units intercepted German transmissions and began broadcasting false orders on captured frequencies. Skorzeny's teams found themselves unable to coordinate movements or confirm bridge status. The sophisticated deception plan collapsed into isolated actions without strategic coherence. By noon December 19th, Skorzeny acknowledged mission failure and ordered conventional combat operations. Disguised vehicles removed American markings where possible. Teams operating in United States uniforms received orders to discard them and fight as regular German forces. The transition occurred piecemeal. Some teams never received word and continued infiltration attempts that ended in capture or death. Panzer Brigade 150 participated in the failed assault on Malmedy during December 20th, suffering 15% casualties in 2 days of conventional fighting. The force that was supposed to seize bridges intact instead engaged in house-to-house combat alongside regular Wehrmacht units. Skorzeny's post-battle report acknowledged physical objectives unattainable, despite psychological effects exceeding predictions. German command assessment proved grimly accurate. Operation Greif had generated Allied confusion and delayed counterattacks, but captured 0 bridges and lost significant personnel to casualties and capture. The deception that opened roads during initial hours now closed them from both friendly and enemy fire. The 44 English-speaking Commandos, who were supposed to lead breakthrough to the Meuse, never reached their objectives. December 21st marked the beginning of Operation Greif's final chapter, when military police near Iwil stopped a jeep carrying 3 German soldiers in American uniforms. Routine checkpoint procedures escalated when guards discovered demolition charges concealed beneath the seats. Maps marked with bridge locations at Huy confirmed infiltration mission parameters. The prisoners, Oberfähnrich Manfred Pernas, Unteroffizier Günther Billing, and Gefreiter Wilhelm Schmidt, faced immediate interrogation. Their testimony provided comprehensive confirmation of Allied suspicions. The three men identified themselves as members of Einheit Stielau, operating under Skorzeny's command. They described training at Grafenwöhr, equipment shortages, and mission objectives focused on Meuse crossings. The interrogation summaries documented Panzer Brigade 150's organization, German knowledge of American procedures, and the extent of infiltration operations. Allied intelligence officers recognized the prisoners' legal status immediately. International law distinguished between legitimate ruses of war and unlawful combatant conduct. Wearing enemy uniforms for reconnaissance or approach constituted acceptable deception. Engaging in combat while disguised as enemy forces violated the Hague Convention of 1907 and qualified as espionage under military law. United States Army Judge Advocate officers reviewed the case under Article 82 of the Articles of War. The legal standard required proof that defendants wore enemy uniforms while conducting hostile operations, testimony, and physical evidence. Demolition charges, bridge maps, forged orders demonstrated clear intent to commit sabotage while disguised. The prosecution case appeared straightforward. Military courts convened on December 22 to try captured infiltrators. 17 defendants faced charges related to espionage and unlawful combatant conduct. Defense arguments emphasized that German forces had not engaged in direct combat while wearing American uniforms, suggesting their actions qualified as reconnaissance rather than fighting. Prosecutors countered that carrying explosives and preparing sabotage constituted hostile operations regardless of whether actual combat occurred. Proceedings lasted less than 48 hours. Testimony from captured Germans, military police who apprehended them, and intelligence officers who analyzed the operation provided comprehensive documentation. The court found defendants guilty under laws of war governing combatant conduct. Sentences specified execution by firing squad, to be carried out immediately given battlefield conditions. At dawn on December 23, execution details assembled near Henri-Chapelle, Belgium. Military procedure required witnesses, formal reading of charges, and chaplain attendance. The 17 condemned men received last rites according to their faith. Firing squads from military police units performed the executions in accordance with regulations governing battlefield justice. Official logs recorded each name, unit, and time of death. Their bodies received burial with military honors. Headstones later placed at Lommel German War Cemetery marked their graves. The executions formalized Allied deterrence against infiltration tactics. Any subsequent German attempts to operate in American uniforms would face similar legal consequences. The swift justice demonstrated American commitment to laws of war even during active combat operations. No further large-scale infiltration attempts occurred during the remainder of the Battle of the Bulge. German reaction proved muted. Skorzeny's remaining forces continued conventional combat without disguise operations. Wehrmacht command accepted the executions as legitimate under international law, though propaganda elements attempted to portray them as Allied atrocities. The legal precedent established during December 1944 would influence special operations doctrine throughout the Cold War. December 23 also brought unprecedented security measures at SHAEF headquarters in Versailles. Intelligence reports suggested Skorzeny's commandos included assassination teams targeting General Eisenhower. The rumor lacked documentary evidence. No captured infiltrators mentioned such missions during interrogation, but generated serious security response regardless of factual basis. Eisenhower's movements became restricted to headquarters compound. Armed guards doubled at all entrances. Courier routes changed daily. Cipher office controls tightened to prevent any communication intercepts. Staff officers underwent additional verification procedures before accessing sensitive areas. The Supreme Commander found himself confined, while subordinates managed battlefield operations with greater autonomy. British Field Marshal Montgomery's role expanded during Eisenhower's restriction. Bradley temporarily relinquished operational control over 1st and 9th Armies to Montgomery, who assumed responsibility for northern sectors during the crisis. The arrangement generated political friction. Some American officers resented British command authority, while British staff interpreted the change as acknowledgement of superior leadership. The command adjustment reflected practical necessity rather than competence questions. Montgomery's headquarters possessed greater proximity to threatened sectors and established communication with defending units. The temporary arrangement allowed rapid decision-making during fluid combat conditions. But perception mattered in coalition warfare, and Eisenhower's confinement suggested vulnerability that opponents might exploit for propaganda purposes. Security paranoia affected military efficiency throughout late December. Staff bandwidth devoted to internal verification reduced attention available for tactical planning. Headquarters facilities, designed for command functions, instead processed identity checks and security clearances. The operational cost of defending against infiltration threats exceeded actual German capability to exploit such openings. By December 25, security measures relaxed slightly as German offensive momentum stalled. Fuel shortages and Allied air power resumption forced Wehrmacht withdrawal from advanced positions. Eisenhower resumed normal movement between headquarters and forward areas. The assassination rumors proved entirely fictitious, but had generated measurable impact on command procedures during critical days. Post-battle analysis calculated the psychological effect of Operation Greif against its material achievements. Approximately 44 German commandos generated fear, affecting over 200,000 American personnel. The mathematical ratio, 1 infiltrator per 4,500 Allied soldiers, demonstrated disproportionate psychological leverage. Yet, the operation failed completely in its primary objective of seizing Meuse bridges intact. Christmas Day, 1944, found American engineers confirming demolition charges on Meuse bridges, while fighter bombers returned to clear skies. Ardennes and Meuse. The crossings Skorzeny's teams were supposed to capture remained firmly in Allied control, with defensive preparations strengthened by heightened security. German forces never approached within 10 kilometers of any target bridge. Weather improvement during December 25 restored Allied air superiority that had been absent during the offensive's opening days. 9th United States Air Force and Royal Air Force, 2nd Tactical Air Force, flew over 2,000 sorties, attacking German supply lines, troop concentrations, and armored columns. Fighter bombers destroyed vehicles that fuel shortages had immobilized along congested roads. The air campaign effectively ended German offensive capability regardless of ground combat outcomes. Engineer battalion officers reported to 1st Army headquarters that all Meuse crossings maintained operational status with enhanced security. Military police detachments positioned at each bridge processed traffic using verification procedures developed during the infiltration crisis. Additional demolition charges stood ready for instant bridge destruction should German armor approach. The defensive preparations reflected lessons learned during the previous 9 days. Bridges represented critical infrastructure, requiring multiple layers of protection. Skorzeny issued fallback orders to remaining Panzer Brigade 150 elements on December 26. Surviving forces withdrew toward German lines, discarding captured equipment and American uniforms. Casualty reports documented 15 killed, 44 wounded, and 89 captured. Loss rates approaching 50% for a unit that had barely engaged in sustained combat. None of Skorzeny's original objectives had been achieved. Allied intelligence summaries credited Operation Greif with temporary tactical success through psychological disruption. German after-action reports conceded complete strategic failure. No bridges seized, no Allied command paralyzed, no breakthrough achieved. The operation consumed resources, generated casualties, and provided lessons in both deception and counter-deception that would influence military doctrine for decades. The mathematical assessment proved stark. German planning assumed 48 hours from offensive launch to Meuse crossings. Actual achievement: 0 kilometers of sustained advance toward any target bridge. Allied defensive preparation time increased dramatically due to German deception, but ultimate defensive success remained absolute. Statistical analysis revealed the operation's true impact. Material damage attributable to Einheitsstahlhelm teams: 1 fuel convoy destroyed, multiple telephone lines cut, various road signs reversed, several minor traffic delays. Psychological effect: headquarters security procedures altered, 200,000 troops subjected to additional verification, command tempo reduced during critical period. The gap between material and psychological outcomes demonstrated both the power and limitations of deception warfare. By December 28th, Operation Greif existed only in after-action reports and intelligence summaries. The disguised columns never reached the Meuse. Their shadow had reached every checkpoint instead. The question of Operation Greif's legality required formal adjudication that occurred 3 years after the battle. August 18 through September 9, 1947, brought Otto Skorzeny before the Dachau War Crimes Tribunal, facing charges related to misuse of enemy uniforms during military operations. The prosecution case appeared straightforward. Captured documents and testimony confirmed German forces wore American uniforms while conducting hostile operations behind Allied lines. Courtroom proceedings in occupied Germany attracted significant attention from military legal experts monitoring precedents for future special operations doctrine. The tribunal heard testimony from intelligence officers who interrogated captured infiltrators, military police who apprehended disguised Germans, and legal scholars who analyzed applicable international law. Prosecutors cited Articles 23 and 29 of the Hague Convention of 1907, which prohibited combatants from wearing enemy uniforms while engaging in hostile operations. The captured maps, demolition charges, and mission documents demonstrated clear intent to commit sabotage while disguised. 17 Germans had already been executed for such conduct during battlefield conditions. Skorzeny commanded the operation and bore responsibility for any illegal activity. Defense arguments introduced unexpected complexity. British Special Operations Executive Officer Major F.F.E. Yo Thomas testified regarding Allied special operations that employed enemy uniforms for infiltration purposes. His testimony described operations where British commandos wore German uniforms to approach objectives, then removed or covered the disguises before engaging in combat. The distinction between approach deception and combat disguise became central to legal interpretation. German Defense Counsel argued that Einheitsstahlhelm teams intended to remove American uniforms before engaging in actual fighting. The infiltrators carried German uniforms beneath their American disguises for precisely this purpose. Planning assumed they would discard false identities upon reaching objectives. While carrying demolition charges constituted preparation for hostile action, it did not necessarily qualify as combat while disguised. The tribunal examined captured German orders and training documents. Instructions emphasized removing American uniforms before opening fire or engaging enemy forces directly. This language suggested German awareness of legal requirements and intent to comply with international law. Whether the distinction held practical meaning during actual operations remained questionable, but demonstrated command-level recognition of legal constraints. Testimony revealed additional complications. Several captured infiltrators had engaged in firefights while still wearing American uniforms when surprised by military police. Others had been apprehended before completing their missions, making their intentions regarding uniform removal speculative. The legal standard required proof of combat while disguised, a threshold that varied depending on individual circumstances. rather than blanket operational orders. After 3 weeks of testimony and deliberation, the tribunal reached its verdict. Skorzeny received acquittal on charges related to uniform misuse. The judgment established that wearing enemy uniforms for approach and reconnaissance constituted legitimate ruse of war, provided combatants remove disguises before engaging in direct combat. The distinction between deception and perfidy became codified precedent influencing subsequent military law. The ruling proved controversial among legal scholars and military commanders. Some argued it created dangerous ambiguity regarding combatant conduct. Others praised it for recognizing practical realities of special operations where absolute categorical prohibitions might prove unworkable. The precedent influenced NATO and Warsaw Pact doctrines throughout the Cold War, with both sides citing the Dachau decision in their special operations manuals. Operation Greif's legal legacy extended beyond Skorzeny's acquittal. The case demonstrated that international law required careful interpretation when applied to novel military tactics. The tribunal's reasoning: that approach deception differed legally from combat deception, established frameworks still used in modern military justice systems. Lommel German War Cemetery in Belgium contains 17 headstones marking graves of infiltrators executed during December 1944. Their names appear in military records as casualties of lawful battlefield justice, distinguished from the broader category of prisoners executed for war crimes. The distinction reflects legal complexity surrounding combatant conduct that continues generating debate among international law experts. Staff college lectures at military academies worldwide cite Operation Greif as case study in deception warfare, psychological operations, and legal constraints on special operations. The case demonstrates both the potential and limitations of behind-lines infiltration tactics. Student officers learn that Skorzeny's operation failed militarily, but succeeded in revealing psychological leverage available through misinformation and identity confusion. The statistical contrast remains striking. Material damage from Operation Greif: minimal. Psychological disruption: extensive. Bridge objectives captured: 0. Allied security procedures altered: comprehensive. The gap between tactical failure and strategic impact demonstrates warfare dimensions beyond battlefield geometry. Post-war doctrinal analysis emphasized cultural knowledge as counterintelligence tool. American military police who asked about baseball in state capitals had improvised effective screening without formal training. The lesson informed Cold War security procedures, where cultural verification supplemented technical identification methods. Soviet military theorists studied Operation Greif extensively during the 1950s, incorporating deception principles into their own special operations doctrine. NATO forces developed counter-infiltration procedures based on lessons learned during the Battle of the Bulge. Both sides recognized that modern warfare included psychological and informational dimensions, requiring defense against non-traditional threats. Skorzeny's post-war memoir, published in 1950, reflected candidly on the operation's outcomes. His assessment: for a few days, our uniforms achieved what our tanks could not fear. The statement captured Operation Greif's essential paradox: tactical failure combined with psychological success that influenced military thinking for decades. Modern special operations forces study the Ardennes infiltration as historical foundation for understanding deception warfare. The case demonstrates both capabilities and constraints of behind-lines operations. Technological advancement has multiplied tools available for infiltration and verification, but fundamental principles remain recognizable from December 1944. Operation Greif deployed approximately 44 commandos in American uniforms within a larger brigade structure designed to achieve outsized psychological effects. The operation captured 0 Meuse bridges and cost Panzer Brigade 150 significant casualties and prisoners. Its principal legacy encompasses legal precedent, doctrinal development, and psychological warfare theory. The Dachau Tribunal's 1947 ruling clarified international law regarding combatant disguise, establishing precedent that wearing enemy uniforms for approach constitutes legitimate deception, provided fighters remove disguises before combat. Allied forces institutionalized counter-deception measures, balancing security requirements against operational mobility. The lessons shaped military doctrine throughout the Cold War and continue influencing modern special operations. In the largest and bloodiest battle fought by United States forces during World War II, the most potent German weapon for several critical days proved to be uncertainty itself. 80,000 American casualties occurred during the Battle of the Bulge, but the infiltration crisis affected force employment and command decisions across 200,000 personnel. A handful of Germans in borrowed uniforms created friction disproportionate to their numbers, demonstrating psychological warfare principles that transcend specific technologies or tactics. The bridges at Huay, Ardennes, and Meuse never changed hands. But for 9 days in December 1944, the question of who controlled American identity created crisis reaching from Luxembourg checkpoints to supreme headquarters in France. In mechanized warfare, dependent on rapid movement and clear command, a quiz about baseball could halt a convoy as effectively as a roadblock.